Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. Now, the G7 summit in Evian, France has ended with two major developments that could reshape the global agenda. Preliminary agreement between the United States and Iran aimed at ending the conflict in the Middle East, and a renewed commitment by Western leaders to strengthen support for Ukraine. At the same time, questions remain over whether the Iran deal can survive over the coming weeks of negotiations and whether the West can maintain unity on Russia. Joining us now to discuss it further is Professor Iulian Chifu, president of the Conflict Prevention and Early Warning Center in Bucharest and former advisor to the Romanian president and former state councillor to the Romanian Prime Minister. Good to have you with us, sir. Welcome.
Good morning.
So looking at, you've advised high-level representatives, the Romanian government. So from your standing right now, how concrete, how serious is this deal that was signed? It was through pageantry, signed in Versailles by Trump yesterday. How lasting is this, you think?
First, it's not an agreement, it's a memorandum of understanding. It's an ad interim type of agreement, but which underlines the fact that both the US and Iran are in a position of wishing the war to stop. On one account, the US has to face midterm elections and they need deliverables, and first and foremost, the price of oil to get down at some levels that could be acceptable by the population. In the case of Iran, they are exhausting their resources and they would really want to move to some of their funds, external funds blocked, and some sanctions being released. In such a framework, I would rather say that there is an inclination to do that, so to move to peace, even though for sure the 60-day to come can lead us in different ways, especially because the understanding of the language in the 14 points proposal memorandum of understanding is completely different by the two sides. It's true, both are trying to sell, put it in between brackets, their own achievements to their own publics or the depending publics. So we shall see how this plays out in the next 60 days, but I would rather be cautiously optimistic.
I want to press you on that cautious optimism that you just mentioned. Now, in the understanding of all this, the details also call for Israel to cease its operations. We know that they're still involved in Lebanon. We've had more strikes by the IDF in Lebanon as well. How much of a liability here and a factor of the success of this memorandum and potential deal is Israel in all this?
Well, it is one way or another part of the deal, even if it's not a direct signatory. On another point, don't forget the one of the statements of President Trump, who says for this part of the world, the Middle East, lowering the number of attacks and limiting the geographical surface in the south of Lebanon would mean actually the diminishing of that influence. On another point, Israel will react at any given moment where Iran, and it already promised this to Hezbollah, will invest funds and try to collaborate, recreate, and found and arm Hezbollah in Lebanon. The understanding, bilateral understanding that has been mediated by President Trump between Lebanon and Israel takes credit on the fact that the Lebanese army will be present in the south and at the border in the line of contact south of Litani River, and not Hezbollah and its forces in any form.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of still questions remain on that front. But at the same time also, if we're looking at the cost of this war, just from the American perspective, apparently $132 billion since the beginning of this conflict. Higher fuel prices. In America, they're called gas prices. What do you think? How much did, let's say, pressure, economic pressure, force Trump to push this deal through?
It's a combination of economic, politically prestigious costs. Why not at the international level? Stated position that played around, but first and foremost, I think that what is important is what we will have at the end of the day, actually after the 60 days of negotiations, because an agreement that would be weaker than the JCPOA of President Obama and with less guarantees or even delivery of the quantity that Iran still has in its possession, I mean the enriched uranium 60%, that could play and really make the sense or the lack of sense of this war against Iran.
Yeah, on that note, you mentioned that deal negotiated under Obama, the uranium. I mean, if we're looking at this right now, scant details about the nuclear file, the nuclear question. I mean, at the same time, this is what apparently, according to Donald Trump, was the reason for this. He's mentioned preventing Iran from having a weapon, but there's no details on this. So, I mean, looking at the near term, the long term, like what do you make of that? I mean, is this still the biggest hurdle? Will this be unraveled in some way, or will this unravel this whole deal?
I will not make any prognosis on that direction. What is certain is the fact that the real result of those negotiations in 60 days or so is the one that is going to mark actually the presidency of President Trump for the next 2 years plus, and for sure the elections in the midterms of the end. For sure, it's also a big game played in the presence and status of the U.S. at the international level. If it is ready and able to achieve a very important objective of this war, it means that the war worth the costs, and at this point things can move ahead.
Yeah. And I mean, we're still unclear if, as we said, those 60 days, they're going to be key. There's still action by the Israelis in southern Lebanon. But I want to just tie into another important topic, that's Ukraine. Now, we've obviously heard very positive things in that joint declaration from the G7. Just from your experience, if we look at that joint declaration, how, let's say, would you interpret that? How sustainable is that? I mean, it's not binding. I mean, this is G7 ultimately, but what is the significance of Ukraine now and very specific mentions of air defense and support and solidarity for Ukraine after the G7?
It's important what we have seen as a political support. You're right about the declaration. It's not a legally binding document. On another point, I think that the most important things are the ones discussed on the margins of this G7. And the most important point I would underline, the one that where we should put as much emphasis as possible, is the agreement of the US to license the production of Patriots and anti-missile missiles in Europe and in Ukraine or somewhere. It has been this discussion. If the licensing moves ahead, then it would allow the companies, the American companies who are already wishing to do so, to produce in Europe, and therefore to really increase the capabilities of defense of Ukraine and of Europe per se. That's the most important point, I think, that can be used into the whole discussion, because actually the political statement that you referred to is actually covering the concrete transfers of capabilities, acquisition of capabilities in the Pearl and some other projects, and more important, the production of such ammunition for the capabilities that, as you know, the whole Europe, especially Eastern Europe and Ukraine, had acquired or are needed for their anti-aircraft and anti-missile defense.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I mean, at the core, there's a lot of European support. I want to ask you about that in more detail. We've heard now that Germany is going to bring together the E5, so these 5 nations that are going to come together in Germany, I believe, next week. We've had also the E3 not that long ago. What do you make of that meeting? Is that going to give us more definite, let's say, pathway of what's happening in Ukraine and security? Tell us your take on that.
Well, there are some concerns, as you all very well know. It comes from Romania, but it comes from Poland and some other states who are not part of this type of gathering minilaterals at the level of the EU most important countries in the sense of capabilities, economy, and production. On the other hand, they are the one who are the closest to having the possibility of producing what is needed for Ukraine. I think that that's a good sense of support for Ukraine. It's a re-emphasize of the commitment. And fortunately, those meetings are also covering some very clear transfers, especially after the fall of the tech project of the 155 millimeters and some other types of investments in the capabilities needed in Ukraine to defend itself and actually needed at the European level to defend itself. What is also very important is the way that Ukraine, and for that matter also Turkey, can be involved in the defense of Europe. So not of the European Union, but of Europe, and how this can play out, because we are discussing about the most important army in the European continent, Turkey, and the most adapted to the wars of the 21st century, Ukraine, and ready to fight. And this is to be integrated in any type of defense, deterrence, security system at the European level.
On a European level, I want to zoom in also to your own country, if I may. Just briefly, just one sentence. Currently, the Romanian government looking at its future, precarious moment. Will we have a government in Romania now, a new government in Romania in the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks? What do you think?
For sure, we will have a government in the next 2 or 3 weeks. There's a possibility that we will have it in a matter of days. There's a possibility that it will last maybe another 10 days, but we will have a government. On another point, don't forget, we do have a government, even if it is ad interim. And from the news that we have from the market, actually, it's even better going on without intervention from the governmental level, at the level of the market. For sure, everybody's expecting releases, is respecting injections or support for the SMEs, first and foremost, but it will come with a government in place.
All right, so thank you for all those really interesting topics there. Thanks for your insights. That was Professor Iulian Chifu there. Thank you so much for all your insights today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. We'll stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.